Well, we can probably go ahead and get started and work our way through here. Again, if you have questions, we'll just keep it informal. I'll try to give you an overview of my trip, and I'll probably just try to go day by day. I haven't had time to really go through the slides and all. Brianna and I mean, she did more work than I did, but that's because she knows how to do it and I don't. But it's just sort of a chronological order of the trip, and we'll walk through it that way. We went with a group from Omaha. The church my brother pastors at is a big supporter of Mid-India Christian Ministries, and some of you may recognize Ajay Lal and David Lal, and they're brothers, and their dad had begun this ministry. They run separate ministries, and I don't know why, if something happened, but they live right next to each other. They attend church together. They share a lot of things, but they each run kind of a separate ministry. They probably share some things, but so we were with David Lal. Ajay is a preacher, and he's been president of the Christian conventions and missionary conventions, and just a dynamic speaker. David's more of I don't preach, and he just equips people and pastors, and so they have different approaches that way. But it's a big mission, and they're doing some great work. So there was a group of 9 of us that left Omaha. I took over, left after church and beat the ice storm, and some of you may or may not remember that. But then we left Monday morning, and it was pretty slick, but the main roads were fine, and so we left almost on time and flew to Newark, New Jersey, and I'd never seen that. We saw New York and the Statue of Liberty from a distance, and so that was kind of fun. And then we had a layover there. I think we were there 4 hours, and then we flew 14 hours to New Delhi. 14 hours is a long time. So I'd done a couple 7-hour flights, but not 14, and it was good to touch down. But I don't do a lot of this. I'd taken one of the trip to Ghana, West Africa, and so this just international travel is just different. I mean, it's just you're checking your passport, and you have a visa, and you got to have your boarding pass, and so I was just sort of on edge. All of us were, I think. You just wanted to have everything in order, and you got to go through the searches, and you just want to do it right. And it gets harder. It's hard for me because I don't hear very well, and then you have Indian nationals trying to speak English, and that's hard enough to hear even if you hear good. And so then, anyway, we got through all that fine, and we got into New Delhi. New Delhi's huge, 20+ million people. New York's 9 million. And so this is a big old place. And we hardly got to see it, but and that's the second largest town in India. There's the one, Calcutta is supposed to have more people, and it's pretty industrialized, and technology is big in there. But as soon as you leave there, it kind of changes. We had a 4-hour. Let's see. Oh, then we had another flight, another 2-hour flight to Jabalpur. And you could tell there was a difference between the New Delhi airport and the Jabalpur airport. We were on a little, not a little, but I mean it was mid-sized plane with propellers and looked a little old, and we're like, okay, here we go. And you felt like Indiana Jones. I mean, it was just like, this is straight out of a movie. And we land in the middle of nowhere, and again, it's old buildings and old airport and nothing. I mean, you're just out there. I mean, and it just looks like a movie scene. You just fly in there, and then we met our team. We did have a guy. They have one of David Lal's son-in-law lives in California, and he flew to Newark, and so he was very helpful to get us to where we needed to go. And so then they had a 12-passenger bus type thing, and then we drove. I think we drove into town. First of all, it was a little ways out, but and we went to. They have what they call Mercy Home, and it's a home for girls right in Jabalpur, and they just house girls that have been abandoned or have no place to go, and so that was kind of neat. And that was our first thing, and they. I guess maybe we'll do that. So that's the Mercy Home. They had a big sign welcoming us. They were more than accommodating and hospitable. They showered us with flowers. I bet I had 20 to 30 different people put leis on me of carnations, and that's just what they do. And
you didn't get a picture of that?
I don't know if we have pictures of that. There's probably somewhere. I had to borrow I left my camera here. I got about 30 miles down the road Sunday and realized it, so I borrowed a camera from someone. So my pictures aren't the best, but we'll see. So we get to this mercy home, kind of a rough spot, but let's see if I can do this. That was the girls, beautiful people, their eyes, and they're just beautiful girls. And they're excited to see you. And we met them up in a room, and they did some songs for us and different things. Very, very, very respectful all the way through. Their kids didn't get out of line once. I mean, it was noticeably different than here. And I don't know if that's a cultural thing or if that's just the mission. But anyway, they were great. So we had some interaction with them a little bit. Again, there's some of the flowers. You can see the girls holding them, and they would just come and put them on you, and they know how to make you feel special. I think they probably appreciate anybody that comes. It's just a demanding, to get to India is hard. I mean, it's just a demanding, and the mission realizes anybody that comes over here is working hard to come over here. And so they go out of their way to make you feel welcome. And so this is, we're 30 hours into the trip and we're just getting there basically. I mean, it was just demanding, and you're up late. I didn't even know what day it was when we got there. I mean, at that point I had we flew all night long and all that. So anyway, we spent a couple hours there. This is my nephew who kind of put the trip together. He works for the church in Omaha. And so we just took different pictures. So that was just a glimpse of a song they're singing. They're praising God. I don't understand all the words, obviously, but they did that for us. And the girls are trying to dance is a big thing over there, and so the girls did a little dance for us. And they would do that several different places we went, and it was just an expressive way for girls to do something in the culture. It's a men-dominated culture for sure. Women were out in the fields working hard. I didn't sense a laziness on anybody's parts, but as soon as you leave the big cities, it changes. I mean, here, Brooklyn's not that different than Des Moines in some ways. I mean, the school's still good, the roads are fine, there's gas stations, over there, it's just completely different. And it's like 200 years ago life. The women are carrying 8-foot pieces of wood from wherever they could find it for their fire for the day, and they can take that for free. Whatever they can pile on their head, they get for free, or whatever. Or bikes, you'd see bikes piled with wood, just small, long, skinny pieces of wood. But anyway, so we were there. Again, that's just a sign that they had to welcome us. This was then a tour of where they lived, and they were happy to show off their rooms. And this was just a pig walking around. They were not nearly as prevalent as cows, but it wasn't unusual to see pigs walking around. Cows were everywhere. Walking down the middle of the road, walking down the side of the road, in the cities, in the villages. They were just everywhere. I don't think so. I mean, you slowed down for them, and I did see one dead on the side of the road, and the dogs were gnawing at that. So I don't know how that works, but they were sort of a nuisance traveling. I mean,
that's because of the Hindu religion.
Because
they are incarnated.
Yes.
The people believe that they come back as something else.
Yeah. I think that's.
So the same thing is true with their pets.
Yeah.
Or the animals
Yeah, and you might have a better feel for some of that, Craig, but the just a nation trapped in false teaching. I mean, it's just they have caste system still pretty strong, and you're born into that. There's 4 different castes, and there's and they don't break out of it. I mean, they just think that's their lot in life, and if I was born in low caste, maybe the next life I'll be in a different place. If I work hard enough at this life, I'll come out. And the church is trying to change that, and and there's some movement that way, but you got 5,000 years of that being embedded into your teaching, and way foreign to us. I mean, way foreign. And I don't know that it's as prevalent in the city, but that's just who they are, culture. This was their schedule, and very, very regimented, very disciplined. Prayer time in the morning, 6 o'clock, breakfast time, 7 o'clock, lunch, and so they were very, very regimented. And they all had jobs to do, and so they had responsibilities. I can't even remember what that. What's that?
Did the kids all talk in English?
No. The kids, none of the kids did. In fact, I don't think any of the workers did, but we had a couple people with us that could translate. So sometimes
That schedule that was up there in English was for your benefit?
I don't know why that was in English. I'm not sure why that was. They are learning English, and so they can probably read it better than they can speak it at a younger age, and so it's certainly a part of their education for sure. Some of the older girls would do better. So, but those were pretty young girls, and yeah, Dave.
These are abandoned girls, correct?
Not all of them are. I think some are placed there by parents just because they can't take care of them, or they just want a better life for them. So, yeah, pretty rough. Yeah, this group, they have a school that's not quite that way, but this was, if the girls didn't have this, who knows what would happen to them, type of thing.
These things with the girls, is that connected with the Wall brothers?
Yes, this is a couple hours away from Demo, which Demo is where the mission headquarters are, and Jabalpur was just on the way there, but they have been going out to different towns and villages to do what they call it House of Mercy, and they have, I don't know, not very many, 2 or 3, but and I mean, the need is crazy. Then this is the compound we drove to. This is a new House of Mercy, and brand new. I mean, we were probably one of the first ones to stay in it, and we stayed on the bottom floor, and then they're working on the top floors, and so they'll be able to take more girls in. But this is 2 hours away from the girls we just saw, so they'll take more. The bottom, I think they'll keep for groups. They do have quite a few groups that come over, but it was lovely. It was hot shower, not as nice as ours, but very, very well done. It's a well-funded mission. I mean, they could always use more money because the need's so great, but they take care of you over there. I mean, could be years. I mean, they could be all the way through school. Well, hopefully find a job or get married. They do arranged marriages sometimes over there, and I'm not sure exactly how that works, if the mission does part of that, but India does a lot of arranged marriage. I sat on the way to Delhi. There was a gal from New York that was going back to New Delhi because of a wedding on her in-law side, and she'd grown up in New York area since she was 3. Her family came over, but so she was American through and through. But she had an arranged marriage at 27. She said she didn't think I'd ever do that, but she said I did, and it's worked out great. But she goes back because his family is over there. Nieces and nephews are getting married and that type of thing. But I thought that was interesting. Even though she lived in New York, it was still an arranged marriage at 27 that she did. And she was very easy to talk to and helpful and that. So this was a new building, and we stayed there. This was just next to our building. This is where they cooked for the conference, and they just set up a tent, and they had great big bowls, and they had bricks with wood underneath of it, and they cooked for sort of a glorified church camp. They bring these pastors and church leaders and their wives in, and for 3 days, and it just reminded me of church camp. They would have main sessions, they'd have some fun in the afternoons, and games and workshops and different things. But it was interesting. That's where they set up to be able to cook for 150, 200 people. And this was out in a village then. We went, I don't know how far, not terribly far out of Des Moines. And David Law's group, they go to these villages, and they're pretty poor, very poor actually. This is probably their only set of clothes, and you can kind of tell. I mean, some of them had shoes, some of them didn't. And again, they just sit there so respectful, and they would recite things together for us and that type of thing. Their eyes were just interesting. They were just very pretty little kids. She hadn't been there very long, so she was a little threatened, I think. But they're doing more and more of these little villages, and again, these people would have no education. They would have nothing if it wasn't for. But it's taken years to be able to get their foot in the door, to be able to have the respect, to be able to do this. And so this wasn't an easy process. It was cold. Yeah, it was chilly. Especially for them. I mean, it was probably 50, but for them that's pretty cold. It gets 120 in the summer over there. So just some different pictures of the kids. Here was praying, and they all fold their hands and pray. And that was just sort of how they do things over there. Then at the end, they were given some, I don't know, this was the guy from the States, and he's married to David Law's daughter. So he works for the mission, but he does a lot of work in the States promoting their mission. He lives in California. He took us over there, and he's passing out blankets, and I just took a picture. They had 50, 60 blankets, and they were given to the children. I don't know who do.
The government don't try and shut them down?
What's that?
The government don't try and shut them down?
No, I don't think they've had any trouble. India's kind of weird, and it took me a while to figure out. We were in when I got back, I looked on travel sites. We were in an area that said travel not recommended, to kind of a dangerous area. And I asked David, I said, he said, this is a pretty rough area for persecution. And we were central. We weren't on the border. It was extreme on the border, the Pakistan border, and they don't like Pakistan at all. But I'll tell you a little bit more about that. They don't mind churches. The church we went to on Sunday was 900 people plus. I mean, not outdoors, but it was obvious it was a church and music playing and all that. But their church here in the villages is way different than the church we went to. The church we went to is very westernized, much like our church, just because they probably were trained in the States, and so they would have a worship team and sing songs, and they had a big Sunday school, and kind of like we used to do Sunday school growing up. They would take an offering, and they would have happy birthday songs, and some of you will remember, I mean, that's probably how they learned it 30, 40 years ago as missionaries when they were in Bible college, and that hasn't changed. But lots and lots of kids, they would bus kids but it was very westernized, just very similar to our church, you know. But in the villages, they're not doing Western church. And I don't want to say, it's not controversial, it's just the Western approach probably isn't the best in these villages, and so they're trying to, I'll explain a little bit of that later, contextualize it, use things that they're familiar with. They write their own songs, and they sit around a little circles, and they sing and worship together like that, and it's very different, but it's probably the right approach. This was some traffic.
It's land that they have owned for a long time. They're not going to be able to afford to move to a city for those wages, but they can continue to live comfortably in their village. They're not going to have like cell phones, or they're not going to be able to afford to send their kids to college, stuff like that. But they will not.
This was by far some of the nicer
They're
roads.
working regularly for that amount.
welfare system here?
Not, well, there is.
I was blown away, but I've been in Tijuana, I've been in Accra, I've been in Juarez. This was nuts. Absolutely nuts. You drive on the left side of the road, sort of, when you want to. And there are hundreds of bicyclists, thousands of bikers. There's thousands of scooters with 12-year-old girls just going down the road. There's walkers, there's cows, there's trucks. And it's just crazy. And they use their horn, it took us a while. The horn was basically, I'm coming by you, just letting you know. It's just a polite thing. But I heard more horns in a few days than I've heard in my life. It was just, they drive with one hand on the horn and they just, and they'll pass. And it's just crazy. I got a couple more, but.
And it wasn't just one person on a motorcycle.
Oh, no. Yeah, I saw 6 people on one little motorcycle at one point in time. I saw, most of the time, there was 3. And not often, but it wasn't unusual to see dad, mom, and an infant just going down the road. The motorcycle's like this, and mom would usually be side saddle on there or something like that. And they're, we're kind of in a bus type thing, and they're here, and I'm here, and it's kind of like, hi, and they're not there for very long, and if they can squeeze through there, they'll squeeze through there. It's just, I don't know how. I didn't see one wreck, and I don't know how. It was, and this wasn't as bad as some. Everybody. You saw all sorts. But they walk down the roads. The cows are in the road. And there's no straight road. You get in the cities, and I have no clue how they're going. There's just alleys, and I don't know how they know. I don't think you could go. We were talking on the way home. If I wanted to take Barb and say, hey, let's go take a trip to India and just have a sightseeing trip, I don't think you could do it. You couldn't rent a car and get to where you wanted to go. You would have to have, you couldn't do it. You would have to have somebody there to do it for you, because it would be impossible. First of all, you can't read, but there's no directions. And I don't think you could drive it. Oh, I better get going then. Okay. Water buffaloes and cows everywhere. This was just a meal they were making. I'm trying to think where that was. They would cook outside. This was in a house. This was in a house next to the village is where that was. So they invited us into their house, and obviously very primitive. There was a little electricity in some of it, but that's where they would cook and do the thing. Again, this is where they were cooking back at the compound where they were cooking, and they had a big crew of people working to cook beans and rice and chicken, and I'm sure they fed them very well. We didn't eat what they were eating, but here they were preparing potatoes and onions and different things, so this is just part of the kitchen. This is probably unusual because they had a big group on campus, but this was really touching. This was the Oasis of Love, and they have about 25 mentally handicapped kids who would just they just wouldn't have a voice. They wouldn't have anything, and so that was special, I thought. And they're teaching them to make things, and they do little handcraft things, and so they try to make them productive, but they're either can't walk very well or mentally not all there, but it was touching that they reached out to those people. Here was some of the jewelry they would make, and they try to sell it and do that. So they work hard. There's a seamstress that they do teach them how to do some of that when they can. Let's see. This was a big school. They run a school. I have some stats on that. This was a public school. Started with 17 students. Today there's 2,400 students. 3,400 graduates since 1985. They have a Bible college with 569 enrolled. So again, bikes everywhere. people were everywhere. They were teaching them how to use computers at the school, and so we toured that. This was another dance that some of the girls did for us. They had candles. Kind of just had that little Indian flavor to it that you would anticipate. Modesty was huge. I didn't see anywhere, even in the big cities, they were very modest in their dress. The dances weren't suggestive, but it was a little more different. This was the worship service for the conference, and it was all led by ladies. The singing was. Then they had a band off to the side with drums and guitars, and it was very, very lively. So that was worship. I spoke first. We were going through the book of Philippians with them, press on. And so this Sheila is David's wife. She was amazing servant, very bright, involved in every aspect of the ministry, and just God just uses her in a special way. But she was my interpreter, which I was thankful because she was very good. Some interpreters are still learning, and it's just harder, but she did a great job. So we did 4 main sessions, and then we had workshops. There was 4 of us who spoke, and so we each took 1 main session. Again, kind of like what we would do. There'd be singing and a main session. That's my brother. You can see some of the flowers. There was a group of men from Cyprus. They were really fun. They were traveling through, and Christian men, and if you remember, that's where Barnabas from the Bible is from, and so it was interesting to talk to them. And the guy with the flowers on was from Cyprus, several of them. This was Troy Reynolds. He's a preacher in Wayne, Nebraska. So the 2 of us were sort of the outsiders. The rest were from the Stonebridge Church in Omaha. And that was his interpreter. At night, they kind of, again, it was just like church camp. They had a great big bonfire, and they would sing. They would do dramas and worship things, kind of sort of like a talent night. And we sat outside. It was cold that night. The fire actually was helpful. The girls would dress up pretty fancy and do more dances. They would come from their house of mercy a couple hours away, so it was kind of a big deal to them. They got to dress up and put makeup on, and you could tell they were enjoying all that. Again, this was just some worship. This was a couple ladies from Stonebridge that led the singing in English, one of the main sessions. And that was Sheila. That was my nephew Mitch. This was just some girls outside that probably wanted their picture taken, I suppose, but they were part of the conference. That was the guys. They sat girls on one side, guys on one side. Not all the churches do that, but in this conference they did. This was just a girl that just kind of ran up. Again, they just want attention. These were some of the handicapped kids. These were some games in the afternoon. They just did fun youth group games, crazy games, with the church pastors and leaders, and they had to put like macaroni on a spaghetti. What do you call it? Spaghetti, piece of spaghetti, and so it was just we laughed hard. Same thing here. They would put an Oreo on your head, and you had to, without your hands, work it down and try to get it in your mouth, and it was just hilarious. We've done there, so that was fun. One of the games was the ladies. We had the Indian ladies had a contest who could put a sari on them the fastest. So it was just a fun effort. This was in the village. That's David Law. That's the missionary over there. This is worship to them. So very primitive. They had this little, I don't even know what it was called, a little tiny piano, but they didn't have to be plugged in or anything, and they would have cymbals, and they would write their music and worship, and it was very, very interesting just to observe. This is what we'll do at communion. This was their communion time. They take a coconut, and I'll explain more of that later, but very, very meaningful. And so I just took a little bit of video of that. Again, this is in the village. This is way different than the city westernized church. So they've tried to take things familiar to their culture and incorporate them. The coconut is a symbol of sacrifice over there. The Hindus would do that in their temples. And so what they're trying to do is take something that's been in their culture a long time and say it's sacrifice, but it's Jesus' sacrifice. And so that was pretty meaningful as they do that. And so they're just trying hard to contextualize things that are familiar to them and introduce Jesus to them through that.
You can pick up one.
But that was very, very neat. Now this was kind of neat. I was on my way to Kopahar here, and they had probably 10 miles of this railway, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And it was big, something that you would carry big things in. It ended up being a cement plant, and for miles, I suppose they would move cement or rock or something, but it was just running down the length of the highway. Farms were prevalent over there, a lot of rice and mustard and soybeans. This was
And
just,
all of their family lives
this
there.
was just more
It's land that
traffic.
they have owned
This
for a
was,
long time.
this was on my way to
They're
Kopahar.
not gonna be able to afford
And there were a lot of these little, this was a bigger town, but a lot of villages where it was just single lane going through there, and you were just took your life into your own hand. I mean,
they're not going to be able to afford to send their kids to college. Stuff
just a
like
second
that,
here.
but they will not grow
And again, it was way worse than this at other places. Women walking down, what'd you say, Dave?
I wondered, it looked like they were bales, round bales.
Oh yeah, there was, and I don't know what all that was. There was big trucks with bales of probably hay of some sort. But the women would carry things on their heads and what? Again, this is on my way to Kopahar, which was a big commitment. I appreciated them. I mean, basically, David Law hired a driver, and he has employees there. But he assigned this driver. It was 4 hours up in the morning. I spent 3 hours at Kopahar, and then we drove home that same day. So it was a long, intense day, but very generous for them to make it happen. So it was just. This was a peacock. You can kind of see the green in the middle. That's their bird of their country, the symbol of their country. So we saw a few here and there, not many, but you can't. It's big. I mean, it's a big, full-grown peacock. It was walking away from me by the time I could get a picture. But can you see that in the middle there, the green? Yeah, it was walking across. But yeah, they're big birds. Monkeys were often seen, especially if there was trees, and they'd be on the side of the road. So they were more isolated, but there was plenty of them. Again, here just driving down the road, and just big cows just doing their thing. This was Kopahar. This is our first glimpse. All of a sudden, this guy, Sindeep was his name, drove me up there, and I had no clue. We said about 3 or 4 words. He couldn't speak English, and I had some Jolly Ranchers, and he took a couple of those, but that was about the extent. All of a sudden, he says, he had to get out and ask for directions a couple of times, and then finally he says, Kopahar. I said, okay, thank you. So we get there. Leroy Lawson and his wife Joy, who I'd met before, he was president of Hope, that was now over in Nebraska Christian College. He was a big shot in our brotherhood, really. He's written a lot of books and a preacher, and he's been coming here since '74, and so I knew him. My brother worked with him, and so that was kind of a joy. Linda Stanton is the one on the left. She came from the church in Mesa where he preached at that time, and so she's been here for years. But Yes, 83, or she said. So she remembered that. This was kind of where they live. Big building. They just got a new vehicle. You should have seen it was an Indian car of some sort. It was old. And you can buy office supplies. It says stationery, but the students can get their books and papers and stuff there. This was Sharon. I can't remember her last name. She and Linda basically run this place. And she gave us a tour. This was her office. And she's kind of the superintendent, I guess you'd say. This was one of the teachers, teaches a class. I can't remember which class. This was their library. And so we just took a tour. This was Dolly Chitwood, no relation to me whatsoever, but I can remember as a 8-year-old VBS, we supported Kopahar, and she's kind of the face of the mission. She went over there and with another gal, Leah Mosier, and these two single gals. How they ever did it, I have no idea. I mean, to go over there 60 years ago is even different than now, and God just blessed the ministry abundantly. She died. I'm not going to be able to tell the year, but apparently the whole town just came out. 95, okay, 95. So she's been gone a while, but she was just kind of a hero in the town. This was some of the classes. The students were in school. They wear uniforms, and this was dinner bell. It was just an old railroad tie. They painted red and white. I thought it was kind of unique, and they just give that a big old hit to signal the school bell. This was just some other gals in class, and very well dressed and neat and tidy. It's old buildings, old desks, old stuff. But it's a big place. It's 32 acres. I was sort of surprised by the scope and size of it, and they have 50 some buildings. So it's a big place, and they don't take orphans, and they haven't been able to do that for a while, and I can't remember exactly why, if that was government regulations. My home church, my youth pastor, associate pastor, adopted a girl from Kopahar, and so they've only had 5 adoptions in their history of that, and she was one of them, and so they remembered. Her name was Kapu. Jim and Kay Price were adopted Kapu. And just different classes. They would have just classes like here, different subjects. This was where they could get drinks, a watering hole type thing. One of the girls, she might have been like one of the teacher's girls. She wouldn't have been old enough for school. I can't remember exactly what this was, but it was chilly that day. They raise crops. This was mustard, and they sell mustard and use mustard. But they try to make enough crops for 6 months. Half the year they're able to feed the kids with vegetables and what they grow. And again, just more classroom scenes. These 2 kids got in trouble, so they're out in the hallway. So so I thought that's picture worthy. So anyway, I don't know what they were doing. This was a group. Across the street, they have a more open area for playground, and they were coming back from recess. Again, I'm not sure exactly. I should remember what that was, but again, just pictures of the different buildings that they have. There's 2 or 3 that are empty. Most of them are being used, but they're large buildings. That was me at the gate. This was some of the farming that they did, and onions, and I don't know what all they had, lettuce and cabbage type things. But it's pretty good sized. I mean, it wasn't huge, but the students would be out. Science class might be doing some experiments. In fact, they were out there, but they got yelled at because they were walking somewhere they weren't supposed to be, so the guy in charge was yelling at them.
What are those white bands of plants there?
On what now?
Grass from here, but I mean, with the footpath,
Yeah, I think that's just a footpath, I think.
footpath, but
What's the crop?
Oh, probably onions there, I think. It might be, I don't know, I can't remember exactly. They had rice and onions, and they had more here than they did like out in the countryside. Most of the countryside was rice and soybeans, and this isn't the rainy season though. They have a monsoon season that comes. This was their tractor. They have these 2 oxen that they hook up, and the guy was super proud of his oxen. And you can see they'd hook them up to this old wood rack, and that's how they did things. But yeah, he enjoyed showing off that.
Are they classified different than cows?
Well, these were bigger than the cows, so I don't know. I mean, that looked like a lot of the cows walking down the street, except these were a little healthier and bigger. But there were a lot of cows with the big Brahma walking through town.
I just wondered, the cows, if it's proper to use them for a tractor, unless this is a different species or.
That I don't know. But they referred to them as their tractor. This was they have a cemetery on site. This is where Dolly and Leah that started the mission were buried. Can't remember exactly what that building was. Might be some power generators. Again, just a street shot right out of Kolpahar. They kind of have 2 sides of the street. This is where the girls live. There's 100 girls that live there, like a hostel. And the only ones that live there are Christian kids, but they do have Muslim and Hindi kids from the neighborhood that parents, the education's high enough where, so they have like 400 and some students, but only 100 girls live there year round, or I don't even know if it's year round, but school year. This was Leroy Lawson on the right, Joy, his wife on the left, and Linda, who was at this church in 83, 84, in her home. They served me a meal there. It's pretty, it's pretty. They have neat trees. This was a generator of some sort that they would use, pretty antiquated and old. This was another playground outside, kind of a big common area. These are some just workers there that are hired. I think they have 50-some full-time employees, counting teachers and carpenters. And this is where the girls live. Big. This is a big building here. This is where the girls live, and we went up there. Here's where they cook. They went to gas cooking recently, and so they have big gas canisters just outside to the left of those windows, and they cook. These pots were about this big. I mean, it's not little. And so that's where they would have some full-time cooks. That would be their job to feed the kids. This was the dining area. The kids would come and eat in this area. This was their living quarters. Pretty antiquated. In one of the windows, they had all their toothbrushes there. It was kind of fun just to see. They just lay them out there in dormitory life. And they had some oats that they'd raised, and they sell some and they use some, but these bowls were this big, and they lay them out on the roof to dry. There's a cement area, and they dry them on the cement area, and then they scoop them up and do that. So, but it's really neat looking grain. This is where the girls were up high, and the girls obviously weren't there, but that's where they shower with buckets. That's their shower facilities. So this was their rooms, very neat and tidy. They were just getting out of school for the day. Again, they have ladies like this would be a dorm mom or a mom that would help with laundry and be their mom. These were just some girls in their rooms, they had this was funny. We walked out, it was kind of a patio, and they have their laundry hanging there, and they had some socks, and of course we can't speak, but I point up these socks, and I'm like, ooh, and there's probably 20 girls out there, so then they got the giggles. I'm like, so then I'd point like, are those yours? And they're like, no, and finally this one girl gets this sheepy screen, and she goes, they're mine. So I had to take a picture of her with her smelly socks. So she was embarrassed, but it was a fun moment. This was some of those girls on that patio, but they were fun. They're just fun kids. Just more playground. This guy he shines their shoes and repairs their shoes, works with leather, and so he's part of the team there, and he's just sitting under a tree fixing shoes. There's a bike carrying some wood. I like this. This is a carpenter shop. This was their wall of tools, and they fix furniture and buildings, and there's a lot of buildings to take care of. But this was those guys, and they were the carpenters. This was another little field where they were growing. I think these were onions. This was the carpenter shop, pretty primitive. And this was probably on the way back home, just people everywhere. Oh, this was a baptism back. This was 5 o'clock in the morning back at Mid-India Christian Mission. So that was Kopahar. We can talk about that in a minute. They came at 5 o'clock in the morning because baptism's illegal, basically. And so the preacher, sort of a preacher, you can be thrown in jail for 2 years for doing the baptism. So they came on campus at 5 just because they didn't want to create commotion. So our team and a handful of others went out there to witness these baptisms. Cold. This guy, he's more from the villages. He came from the upper caste system, which is unusual. So he has plenty of money, but he basically just a rabbi type teacher. I mean, it seemed very biblical. He had a big beard. He wears an orange robe, which kind of signifies that he's able to, people would come to him like a counselor or a spiritual leader. And he had been a Hindu priest, and David had worked with him, and now he's a very, very, very intelligent, knows his Bible, and he just works with whoever comes to him, and he has a group of followers that might give him money or might give him a gift, and it just sort of reminds me of biblical, they just sort of go with him. But there was a group of students, some had traveled hundreds of miles to be by him, and they were baptized there, and so I couldn't quite figure out the persecuted. It's not, I mean, like churches out in the open, they don't get persecuted that I can tell, but the act of baptism is the conversion part of it is they really, that's illegal. And so this was church on Sunday morning up there, big facility full of kids. I taught Sunday school to a high school class for a half hour, and then they would come to a praise and worship time and sing happy birthday and just make announcements, and it was very energetic. And then church would be afterwards. Lots of kids, tons of kids. So that was basically our time at Demo and the mission. And on our way back to the airport, we had how'd that work? I mean, I lose all sense. I wasn't there for the final day of the conference because I went to Kopahar, and so I didn't go. They also do a lot of multimedia, very big in multimedia with the mission. They get together with Good News Productions out of Joplin. They're very tied in with them, and it's a big deal. They have very nice multimedia equipment. And they also have a shop where they're teaching boys electronics, and they didn't have carpentry, but they had 2 or 3 different things. I didn't get to go to that. And then how'd that work? We left, I can't even keep it straight, and traveled by a van or a minibus, and they took us to a train station, and we had like an 11-hour train ride. Remember, on the way up we took a second flight. This time we took the train, and it was sketchy. Again, it was like Indiana Jones. I mean, it was old, and we were all like, and they put us on first class, which was nice, but that was the first night we could just sleep, and it was awesome. I mean, but we got in at 3 in the morning to Agra, which is close to the Taj Mahal, and then we had to get up at 6 just to get in line for the Taj Mahal, so we had 2 hours of sleep that night or whatever, 3 hours. But the train ride was just crazy, the traffic. I mean, it was just crazy. But they did run down. There was a Domino's Pizza like a mile away, and one of the workers ran all the way down there and ran all the way back, and about the time we got on the plane, he gives us Domino's Pizza. Way different than our Domino's Pizza, but it was still good. I got sick. How'd that work? Before Taj Mahal, we went to a wildlife park. They have a national wildlife park, and so we got to go on a safari ride in the morning, at 6 in the morning till 10, and we had eaten the night before, and I could tell I was in like big trouble. I ate something that I shouldn't have, and all night long I'm just like, I could just tell this isn't going to be good. And I wake up, of course I want to go on this safari and get on the Jeep, and we had to use our passports all the time to check into places, and we check in the passports, and I'm just like, oh, this isn't good. And so I'm on this open-ended Jeep in the back, luckily, and it's open-ended, and like not pretty little, it was like, so I fed the dogs and the cows that were walking the street, and it was pretty major. And then I felt better, but I was embarrassed because your whole team's going like, woo, and but I felt like maybe I got it all out. So we went 2 hours on the safari, came back, and they have sort of a breakfasty area for you, and I didn't touch that. I mean, it was like I can't even smell. I didn't want to smell anything, and I threw up a couple more times there, and then after that it was like life was good again. It got better. So, but it wasn't much fun. So, but it was been a long time since I had. No, but we saw one. The mission, the guy there hired one kind of to surprise us. When we walk out, and my nephew, he's this big, strong guy, goes, "Ah, snake!" And here's this snake charmer, and he's got 2 cobras, and they're. And I wish, again, I was out of batteries in my camera, but these snakes are coming, and he would pick them up, and he's playing this flute just like you see on cartoons, and these cobras are just, I was from here to John at that cobra. I mean, that was about as close as I went, but it was, and, but he did that just for our group. So I didn't see anything at the Taj Mahal. Taj Mahal was amazing. I like how they make things, I guess. So I like work my hands, but the inlaid marble was just, and this was built in like the 1600s, I think, by some Ming dynasty or something. They were going to build a second one, but took 22 years, 20 to 30,000 workers. But the whole thing is just inlaid with marbles from Belgium, from Italy, from India. It's a very fascinating building. Again, I didn't have all that's inlaid marble. I mean, it had to be done in the 1500s, and this is throughout. This is just one 10-inch spot, So it just took years for them to chisel that out and to clean that out and to put pieces in there, and very fascinating construction. That was our team at the Taj Mahal. I think that it. Anyway, Kopahar. You guys have been supporting them for years. They want us to pray for them because I asked, what can we be praying for you? And they just need new blood is what they need. You got a couple old ladies that have been there and given their a lot of years, and but it's daunting. I think they lose 6 teachers because of there's like an accreditation board, and then 6 of their teachers will turn over 60 this year, so they'll lose those teachers, and so it's just they're just having a hard time finding someone to take their place, and it would be a daunting task. It would be very, very large. I thought it'd be cool if 3 or 4 families of 30-year-olds, young recent graduates would get together and say, hey, let's devote our life to that. It'd be an awesome ministry and an awesome setting. And they used really those 2 gals were about the only Americans over there, and they said they can't do it with just the natives, the nationals there, because they need American resources, and so they want a director to be from the States just to have the resources financially to be able to keep it going. So I'm guessing this mission is, a lot of our churches have supported this mission for years and years, and so they've been well funded, but pray for them. They just said we need helpers. So any other questions? We don't know, and they didn't know. Even the people there, some you would see, and there'd be someone walking down with a couple cattle, but most of them were on their own. And even the people there says a lot of times no one knows who owns them. Yeah, and goats. There were goats, not as many, but cows were everywhere. So, yeah, they don't eat the cows.
Do you want to know how they get fed?
They just eat what they can off the streets and wherever. I mean, Some probably, some are used by people. Some are part of their livelihood or whatever, and they would get fed. But I honestly don't know. They're skinny and aren't well fed, some of them for sure. But they're everywhere. They're everywhere.
Latitudinally speaking, where are they with respect to some place in the North America, South America, as far as from the equator or north or what? Do you know?
They're in the 1040 window. I don't know if that makes sense. That's kind of a big term in missions. They have 2,000 some unreached people groups, but I couldn't tell you.
I'm thinking of weather. That's what I'm.
Weather, this was the nicest time to be over there. It was cool. I wasn't going to bring a jacket, and I was so glad I had a jacket. It might have got to 75 in the day, which was nice, but the evenings were cold. Like the safari ride, we all froze. I would say it was in the 40s. Like when we had evening activities outside, when they did the dramas and the singing and stuff, it was chilly. I mean, it was cold. So, but this was nicer. The summer they shut down in the summer for a month or two just because of the heat. The missions and the schools, they say it can be 120, and I can't imagine the smells in the summer. I mean, the smells were pretty poignant when I was there. Just an odd variety of smells, the food or the people or the animals, but in the summer I gotta imagine it's just like
You'd have to watch where you ate
they.
all the time.
We had bottled water only, and the mission just kept giving us bottled water over and over again. Even like in a restaurant, you wouldn't order something with ice in it because you didn't know if that ice was clean. So they had people that fixed food for us while we were at the conference and all that, and so it was safe to eat, and it was wonderful. I mean, it still sort of had an Indian flavor to it, but it was by far more Americanized. I mean, they would give us some French fry type things or chicken meals, and but we didn't. We ate at one restaurant, and we had butter chicken. They're famous for butter chicken. And I was all excited, but it wasn't so great. So
Did Copelhart have chickens for eating and stuff like that? I mean, raise their own livestock?
I didn't see any chicken. There weren't many chickens in the whole country. Which when I went to Mexico, they were everywhere, and so I don't know why I didn't see very many running around. And
You showed that one wild pig kind of.
yeah, there were pigs.
Do they have animals, or are they just strictly plant?
The only ones I remember seeing are the ox. I don't remember seeing animals raised there. They might, but I don't remember seeing any. The day I went to Copelhart, the other group went to a Hindu temple and went to a Hindu worship service, and that must have been quite an experience. They all were kind of shook up by that, honestly, just the darkness and the drums beating again, kind of that Indiana Jones Temple of Doom, just that hopelessness. And they were just blown away by the hopelessness of people that for years this has been that's what they do and that's what they know, and they're trapped in this. There's no freedom, and it's negative and dark, and that's where the church needs to shine and do that. The pastors were incredible. One of them had started 31 churches in his 31 years of ministering. These learning centers out in the villages are becoming popular, and they're using those relationally, and that's growing. So they have 20, 30 kids that they sort of teach and do that, but it's an inroad to parents, and it's a inroad to people who would have no access to a church or any of that kind of stuff. Very fascinating, but way different lives, hard lives. I was struck by just a day had to be a hard day for them, just working and making a meal and some of that, but especially outside. But when we went to Copelhart, it was a 4-hour drive. When I thought, well, that won't be so bad. We'll get out of the town. The town of Demoa was about 200,000. I thought once we get out there, we'll be able to just go 55 and cruise to Copelhart. Well, you don't cruise anywhere there. I mean, a lot of times it was single road and asphalt's missing and you're driving on half the asphalt, half the dirt, half the time, and just hard on vehicles. I mean, it just constantly, bridges were out, and so they'd go down and around the bridge and come up the other way, and you couldn't have slept on the vehicle. It was just constant movement, and but I was really glad to go to Kopar. Again, it was just kind of the generosity of that mission. They just so accommodating. I mean, it's like, he knew I wanted to go there, and he says, "Are you want to go?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I'm not in charge of the trip." So I had one day where I didn't have to do a workshop and speak, and he said, "Well, do you want to go?" And I said, "Well, I don't want to put you out." And he said, "Do you want to go?" And I said, "Yes." He says, "You go tomorrow." And I was like, "Okay." He said, "Be here at 6:30. I have driver for you," and that's just the way he operated. I mean, whatever you wanted, he was going to do for you, and he didn't argue with him. So. It's crazy. I mean, that's just crazy. So, but anyways, very, very neat. If you have an opportunity to do something like that, it's just fascinating, but encouraging. I mean, these pastors are over there just shining their light and doing the same things. So, I don't know if I have any other notes. Here's Mid-India Christian Mission. In 1969, they witnessed their first baptism. As of 2014, 17,000 people have been baptized. In 1970, they planted their first church. As of 2014, 450 churches. They planted 67 unreached people groups since 1970, so they're going out in some of these villages and that nobody's ever shared Jesus with. They've trained 486 pastors. They serve in 156 villages, towns, and cities. So it's a big scope. It's not a small operation, and so it's just interesting. But they're training and doing and sending, and but less than 2% of the population. I was sort of blown away by the size of India. Just so big and so many people. I mean. You didn't go down the roads very long, and there's another just markets and people standing on the side of the road and fixing breakfast and just people. You always saw people. Almost, there was hardly a time where it didn't matter if you were far from town or in town. There was just people walking and but motorcycles and bicycles everywhere. So anyway. Oh, I forgot to tell you, I got named cricket MVP. So they had one of the afternoons at the conference. They had us, and they taught us how to play cricket, and they had a big open area, and we played another team. They must have wanted our support and money because they didn't try very hard. But I ended up. I made one really nice catch, and they were all oohed and awed, and then I scored some runs. So they gave us. They took it serious. They bought uniforms for us, so we had to wear white shirts and blue sweatpants, and it was a lot of fun. They had 100 people watching, and they had a microphone, and they're announcing your name, and it's like you felt like you were a rock star, So at the end, actually, I got another trophy for something. So they were all giving me a hard time on the trip, but I wanted you to know I represented Madison well. So anyway. So thanks I know many of you donated, and the church helped pay for part of that, and very thankful for the opportunity to go. So anyway,